Thanks, everyone. It's great to be here today. It's been actually really refreshing to be with people that get kind of what we do as product marketers. So thanks for that. My name's Sudeep Cherian. As mentioned, and during this session, we're going to cover the often misunderstood but critical role a product marketer can play in serving an organization during the pre-launch portion of the product development lifecycle. As we all know, and I feel like it's been said ad nauseum today, there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach to how organizations operate, let alone how product marketing is conducted. But I hope my perspective, based on my experiences, will offer you another way in which product marketing can add value from the early stages of the product development lifecycle. So, as I mentioned, this is based on my experience. So let's dive into that. In terms of my experience, briefly. I had the good fortune of going to school down the road at UT and later at Michigan, and I've had a chance to work at the companies listed here in product and go-to-market strategy and operating roles. Most recently, in fact, as of last month, I wrapped up my 10 and a half years at LinkedIn, where I helped establish and scale the product marketing practice while being part of the LinkedIn Marketing Solutions business. Now I serve as an advisor to various organizations as they look to scale and grow their product and go-to-market practices. So with that background, let's dive into our discussion today. Now, since leaving LinkedIn, even though it was back in January and formed the team back in September, and since then I started taking on more of a consultative role through folks in my network, and through those dozens of consultations with business leaders as they look to revamp, scale, or establish their product marketing function, consistently I found that they have a narrow understanding of what the role could offer, and more specifically, very commonly they would think that the role would only begin once product is ready to launch, and we all know that's a common misconception. And so to demystify that, where I'm going to spend the majority of my time is here on the first three chevrons of the process of the product development lifecycle. So the good news is there have been and will be a whole bunch of great sessions that go deeper into the latter two stages, and from hearing the panels and others today, they even went into some of these individual stages pretty deeply. So it's good you'll have a complement of information over the course of these 2 days. But let's dive right in with the first part of the process here with idea generation and concept validation. In some instances, this is called business case development stage or exploration. And this is where an organization is going to come up with a concept that serves the needs of its users, customers, and partners. And in most cases, at this stage, the ideas that are generated here are usually centered around a pretty strong hypothesis on a customer problem that the company could potentially solve. This may be addressing a long-standing opportunity that the company's known about for some time, but it could also be associated to more greenfield exploration of new value streams we could unlock. For instance, at LinkedIn last year, I think it was right around this time, January, February of last year, we were challenged with thinking about how might we grow the marketing solutions business from $5 billion, which it was at the time, to $10 billion within 3 years. Now that was a pretty lofty challenge because I mentioned I had been there for 10 and a half years. It took us about 10 years to go from $100 million to $5 billion, and so to try to get to $10 billion in the next 3 years was a pretty big challenge from our executives. But it did open up the opportunity to explore greenfield opportunities. And so in either instance, whether it's a more obvious opportunity that's been explicitly stated by your customers or something more greenfield, the product marketer serves a very critical role as the voice of the market expert. If your product marketers are needing to kick off an exercise to have an initial point of view, I usually think that they're too late to the game, and they probably have less value they can offer at the table alongside the other people trying to explore what's next and what's going to grow this business. And so that brings me to the first thing I think every team should have in order to offer value at this stage, which is an ongoing market intelligence practice. So actually, is it possible you could scroll down on the notes there? If not, let me explain what this means. Actually, let me go back one slide. Since it's not up here on the slides, I'll explain what this means in practice. This isn't just a one and done opportunity, but this is ongoing. If you look at the product marketers on my team historically, I expect them to have on a biweekly basis a conversation with at least one external party. So that could be a customer, a partner, an analyst, or an agency, in addition to an internal engagement, whether that be someone in customer success, customer support, or an account executive, on a biweekly basis. But it's not just having those conversations, but it's then translating that into a synthesis of what they've learned and sharing those learnings internally. And so as a product marketing team, we actually review those discussions and what people have learned, what are the implications of that. And that's shared actually not just across product marketing, but across product management and with our sales teams. Those are also documented internally for future reference, and then can be built on when you do deeper exercises on a quarterly or biannual basis as you're running through strategy or operating plan exercises. So the first step is really having that ongoing engagement and touch bases. And the idea is that with this ongoing set of touch bases, you will have an opportunity to unlock bigger ideas that may not have been obvious based on what you're explicitly hearing from the customer. And so just one quick point. I think the notes are not necessarily attached to the slide. It's on the wrong slide here. But I will continue forward here and talk about an example in my, actually, this is slightly off. So okay, let's just ignore the notes here and just talk about an example that I had during my time at LinkedIn on how we built that ongoing intelligence practice. So early 2020, as we all remember, started the COVID pandemic. And at that time, as a marketing solutions business who's servicing B2B marketers, we had the challenge of not just organizations, but also marketers within those organizations pausing activities and spending across the board as they were trying to figure out what's the appropriate next step to take for their business in an uncertain climate. And so product marketing was tasked with bringing in the voice of the market on a weekly basis to our executive team and company at large. And so what we did was we went out and engaged in active feedback loops that we already had in place, such as interviews, surveys, customers, with customer sales, partners, and analysts. But it wasn't just built on that at that moment, but the foundation of knowledge that we already had. And then, as mentioned, we shared those weekly readouts and what we were hearing and associated implications. Now, through these conversations, we were able to quickly identify the shift of offline events to online events, and along the way we proposed that we prioritize the rapid development of LinkedIn digital events on top of what we had at the moment, which was LinkedIn Live, which was primarily built for our members. This was built on an additional justification on distinct competitive advantages we had relative to other social platforms and other digital event providers. But that insight really came out as a result of PMM having an active ear externally and a respected voice internally on the market because of what we were already producing on a regular basis within the organization. So I'll spare you the details on how that played out, some of which ultimately laid out here, but it was a win from our side to be able to uncover that in a time of need for the organization on what to do next, as well as our customer base. The second, just once it seems the notes just went out on the slide here, but I'll say the second thing is market validations that I wanted to reference. And so market validations, these are where you may have a more obvious set of understanding on what you may want to go do, less greenfield opportunity. In this instance, I really think it's the product marketer who should drive this exercise. while the product marketers primarily focused on deeply understanding the problem, they should also offer a starter set of ideas to the company on how the company could potentially solve this problem and bring that back to your product managers as well as the rest of the team across the table. Now, this exercise is regularly welcomed. I heard a lot earlier about sales tension on actually engaging with customers, but I've actually found that when identifying the customers that you want to engage with sales, having them still own that relationship, that sales actually, as well as customers, welcome these engagements, particularly enterprise customers, because they feel involved in the innovation process and they feel heard. And so tapping into existing relationships you may have in addition to other forms like customer advisory boards and such. Some organizations may have their product managers own this responsibility, but I think it's critical for the product marketers to actually own this in order to maintain an authoritative voice on the market, both internally as well as externally. So strongly encourage you all as much as you can to try and own that relationship with your customers and bring that back to product and other teams. So with that, let's dive into the next stage, product planning. So at this stage, the team has a product concept that they feel confident to pursue, and they're beginning to begin the design process and further refine the definition of the product itself. The product marketer at this stage should shift their efforts to be more around product validation. This includes externally exposing the expected target audience to the product concept, but also sharing the proposed positioning and messaging and refining the understanding of differentiated value. So this is where you can get a whole host of learnings, including willingness to pay, better prioritized set of features, and over time refine what exactly is that solution and the set of messaging that's going to resonate best. Now, the product marketer is also expected to tap into internal audiences, such as customer-facing teams and sales, to gain feedback on the solution and messaging. And it's also when you can start to pitch internal audiences on the product vision and gain alignment on the importance of the investment in the solution itself. Now, some may argue at this stage that product marketing should kick off cross-functional go-to-market planning and go-to-market strategy development. But personally, I feel it's too premature at this stage until you have an actual solution that's been properly tested, as things can change once you move into that next phase. But as one of the earlier panelists mentioned, like, you can always get started on messaging, refining the audience understanding, even at this stage. The last stage I'll walk through is the product development stage. So at this point, the team is focused on building a product or feature that's technically sound and reliable. And at this point, they're conducting QA and testing to optimize the solution to have it launch ready. The first major role I think product marketing serves here is to run customer testing of the product through leading the alpha and beta phases. This is generally a very heavy lift for product marketers, for major products especially, but it allows the product marketer to be in the lead position to test and inform the product and go to market ahead of the development of a launch plan. The product marketer here they establish an internal cross-functional team to execute the alpha and beta stage and refine over time the understanding of the target audience, the narrative, the pitch, as they go through recruitment. But they can also gain a lot of learnings, whether it comes to messaging, education, onboarding, and additional support needs to truly make sure the product is a success as it gets out of the gate at launch. It's critical that the product marketer serve in this role so that I think the product manager can stay focused on orchestrating the R&D organization on the build. So I think you really need to work hand in glove through this process, this stage in particular, especially because the product marketer will be engaging directly externally and can bring a lot of that feedback back to both R&D as well as your go-to-market teams. Now, as you exit the alpha and beta stage, the product marketer serves an essential role in aligning the entire organization on the decision to move forward based on exit criteria and learnings from each stage. This communication and coordination enables the full organization to work as one through the development stage. I think Many have said how product marketing or aspires to, or strongly feels that they sit at the center of a lot of the product development lifecycle as well as go-to-market processes. And I truly feel that, especially at this stage, to ensure that there's alignment on why are we building what we're doing, who are we trying to go after, and how are we going to win. The second role I think is critical at this stage is the development, socialization, and refinement of the go-to-market strategy. I've traditionally seen this manifest through an artifact that we called at LinkedIn the Marketing Requirements Document, or MRD for short. And it's been very powerful to help drive that alignment at every step that I described earlier, as well as beyond. It's a living document. It established at the start of the process, that first chevron, and is the source asset to capture and socialize the go-to-market strategy. And we're not just talking in theory here. I'll show you in practice an example of one that we built so you can see what that looked like at LinkedIn. But certain components that make up this document are elements like market problem and size, voice of market, including customer pain points, and sentiment from customers, including internal teams. Product strategy, translating the product requirements document into the top features, functionalities, pricing strategy, and product KPIs. Your target segment and target customer, the summary of the target buyer, attribute-based segmentation characteristics, or even buyer segmentation elements that you want to surface up through this document. The competitive landscape, your portfolio strategy. What I mean by portfolio strategy, how does this product fit into the overall roadmap and company's portfolio? And lastly, should also be inclusive of the messaging strategy and positioning, problem statement, tagline, key benefits, et cetera. By having all of this in one document, I usually use it in a long form document. It really allows all of the various stakeholders that you're engaging with have a foundation for what we're building, why, and how we might go about it. And I think will really set you up well going into launch planning phase as you exit the development stage. So as I promised, we'll look at one of these that were in the wild. How many of you were familiar with LinkedIn Pages, by show of hands? A few of you. So LinkedIn Pages are essentially the equivalent of what a member may have with a LinkedIn profile, but it's a profile for organizations on LinkedIn called LinkedIn Pages. So what LinkedIn Pages, as I mentioned, is how organizations represent themselves on LinkedIn. And as part of this, we were launching a new type of page called product pages so that organizations could represent the products they have and gain ratings and reviews, as well as post content related to their products on the platform. So the MRD here, this is just the first 2 pages, and I'll walk through the entire thing, but at a high level. It represents, to start with, the product, the market problem, as well as the size of the problem, as you see right there on the top of the second page, as well as different perspectives that we had over time that were informing the voice of the market. And I think it was the previous speaker who had talked about, is it data or is it opinions or is it, I've heard qual or quant. And we like to represent both, depending on, just to show the breadth of insights that we have that inform our perspective, and use this as a central point for reviewing that. So here we list out the customer pain, the various voice of customer, from our CABs, our biannual customer satisfaction survey, as well as a series of other internal and external sources. If I had to do this again, I would have likely asked the product marketer to do a better job of synthesizing the key takeaways, as opposed to simply listing out key takeaways across within each given source, but instead synthesize across all of the sources the real implications there. But gives you a sense of kind of how much we're pulling from in order to represent that. Next, product strategy, which we start to hit on here. As I mentioned, it's a distillation of what's coming from the product requirements document, as well as what you understand to be true of the product. This is particularly helpful for those further removed from R&D, whether that be your other partners in marketing, or even partners you're working with in sales or otherwise who want to get a quick understanding of what the product is. And then, there are details about the product development stages, and an early view into the launch strategy and associated KPIs that matter related to this launch. What we move into next is the target customer. Ideally, this is built on existing segmentation frameworks or personas, as we heard about in the last talk, which is the foundation of universal language, if you will, that you're using internally on who you're trying to reach and why. And so in this instance, we're using many of those associated frameworks, if you will, on segmentation and personas that folks at LinkedIn are familiar with. And then next, we move into competitive landscape, and that's what's listed here. So we go deep into referencing, how are other competitors going about a similar solution, and then what most importantly is that first category on what is LinkedIn's or the organization's unique differentiation, and make sure that's well understood across our partner teams. From there, hopefully going into some depth is helpful, but I'm going to continue forward. From there, we outline the portfolio strategy, where we outline how product pages would actually be positioned alongside our other organic solutions, whether that be LinkedIn Live, LinkedIn Events, LinkedIn Pages overall, as well as our ad products. And finally, the messaging and positioning strategy and positioning statement, where we represent how we're going to ultimately articulate the value of these pages to the market. In some instances, we may break this into a deeper document with a messaging framework that has certain segmented messages and associated narratives off of those. But this offers us that first starting point. I like to think of it as the V1, if you will, at this stage, and then it's more further refined as we go into our launch plan with more variance, if you will, on the audiences that we're trying to speak to and where we may need more tailored messaging. So that's a very quick view into some of my thoughts on roles that product marketing could serve on the pre-launch process. I think when organizations really embrace and have a really strong partnership with product marketing from the start, that solutions are going to be more well aligned with customer needs from the get-go, and you're going to have more strong product market fit right out of the gate as soon as you launch those products, as well as a really clear understanding on who it is and who it may not be for immediately. I think you're going to actually have R&D free up bandwidth for more obvious foundational enhancements and bug fixes, and that'll lead to a more stable platform, but also have a partner in product marketing to help drive forward innovation and explore innovation. And then lastly, I think, and this is one of the most important roles a product marketer can serve on, is stronger alignment across the organization. What are we building? Why and for whom? And at a strategic level, where are we trying to play and how are we trying to win? And I think product marketing is one of the most powerful roles to be able to go out and help inform that. So that's all I had. Thanks for listening to my perspective. I wanted to leave ample time here, or at least a few minutes for questions and feedback. In particular, challenges of implementing what I've recommended. I know we're across a series of different industries, different sizes, and things you might do differently or
Okay, we have a few questions. I'm going to group them a little bit. The RMD document situation, we love acronyms, but the marketing requirements document. So at LinkedIn, in this case, who was responsible for creating the document, but then also which teams at LinkedIn would actually consume that? And then would you create a separate one for, essentially based on that consumption?
The owner of that document is the product marketer, and the product marketer associated to the given solution that's to be launched. So in this instance, I had a product marketer who was associated to product pages, and so they were responsible for creating the market requirements document. The audiences that were consuming that are pretty wide-ranging. At the start of the product development, actually as we move into product development, at the alpha and beta stage, I should say, we put together a cross-functional team, which is made up of the product manager, design, engineering lead, and then on the go-to-market side, you have a sales rep, an account executive, and customer success representative, as well as product operations. and then a few representatives from content, marketing, as well as demand. And so all those folks sitting around the table are recipients of this document and help contribute to it. What I didn't include in there and is more actively represented in the launch plan is regional insights and other core segment insights. And so we will have vertical marketers that will contribute to the document and also create more segmented documents as a result of being associated to a given launch.
Okay, so lots of people involved in creating the marketing requirements doc. Like, give me some percentages, a split, like in terms of, is it the PMM to drive more of that messaging, that positioning, and then product team comes in, they're like, cool, here are the speeds and feeds, here are the technical features, capabilities. How do you see that kind of workload split out across those different functional teams to create that living document?
Well, the document is almost, I'd say almost 100% created and maintained by the product marketer. For instance, they'll spend time with the R&D organization to deeply understand the product itself. And so that representation of what was in, for instance, the product strategy area, that's a distillation of what the product ultimately is. Yeah, it's almost 100% the product marketer driving that, and they're responsible for every component of it, including messaging. Yeah.
How long would it take your teams to complete the MRD?
Yeah, so it's a pretty heavy lift. So that was for a major release, and so we have tiered playbooks for how we would engage, whether it's a incremental, minor, or major release. That was a major release, so it was a bit more robust in nature. How long would it take? I mean, it's the primary doc you're using along the way. And so it's not like I'm sitting here and creating this all in one day necessarily, but it's pretty, I'd say those are all responsibilities for a product marketer to be able to articulate, even if it wasn't in the document itself. And so it's essentially mirroring kind of what they would need to do, but at least channeling all of that into a singular document.
Okay, other questions. What ways have you found to be effective to get people across the organization to agree to the exit criteria or even the marketing requirements doc?
I'll start with exit criteria. That's really helped by, well, we've run into issues with that, as I'm sure most organizations do, where there may be a differing bar on what's truly market ready. Usually that tension we've found is between our sales organization and product organization, whether it's meeting certain product stability goals, certain output goals, certain customer satisfaction goals. So what's helped is over time, we've always captured benchmarks for it needs, on average, we have a customer satisfaction of 7.5 or whatever it might be, 75% or above. And so we use those benchmarks as a starting point to at least align the organization on what we've historically agreed to move forward. But the other piece is bringing the different functions to the table. And so as I mentioned at the start of the alpha and beta phase, we bring many of those functions around the table, but it's usually folks at the IC level. And so by having them around the table, they can help bring in different perspectives on, as we prioritize these different criteria, they'll help inform the criteria of which to map off of, which is originally built off of historically what we used for exit criteria, but then they'll prioritize on what matters most. And then they'll bring forward a recommendation. And then ultimately the decisions have to be made by the cross-functional leadership team at the VP and above level on if we're going to move forward or not.